Every day, we get closer to the brink of everything. We've been reminded over this past month about our own mortality by the recent deaths of two prominent religious figures, Archbishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa and Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh at his Vietnam monastery. The topic of being on the brink has been on my mind as I was reading a book by the Quaker scholar and poet Parker Palmer called On the Brink of Everything, Grace, Gravity, and Getting Old, published about 4 years ago when Parker Palmer was only 79. It seemed appropriate to put some impressions from that book together with some thoughts about the long life of Archbishop Tutu, who died at 90. I've felt a special personal connection with the Archbishop from about 20 years ago when my wife and I were introduced to him by friends of our Indian relatives at a restaurant near Boston. As you might expect, in that little 2-minute encounter, Tutu was quite personable, affable, and engaging. So I could see how he became famous for joking and laughing, and like Jesus, telling allegorical stories to make his points. Published obituaries have all focused on Tutu's contributions to his homeland of South Africa, overcoming apartheid. But I found this quote from a book of his reflections with the Dalai Lama, called The Book of Joy. As soon as I wake up, I remember that everything is interrelated. So then I set my intention for the day, that this day should be meaningful. Meaningful means, if possible, to me, to serve and help others. Taking care of others, helping others, ultimately, I think, is the way to discover your own joy and to have a happy life. I thank Jan LaRoque for finding the YouTube videos where he summarized this message of Ubuntu, which echoes our own seventh principle about affirming the interdependence of all existence. Also, the recent death of Thich Nhat Hanh at age 95, just last weekend, prompted another personal memory from a Buddhism seminar at the Star King Seminary in Berkeley, which I was attending 25 years ago. Our class on meditation was invited to attend a special meditation session with Thich Nhat Hanh in a crowded auditorium in the university campus in Berkeley. My personal impression of the man called Tay, the teacher, came from being with about 100 other folks in a large room with him for about an hour. We listened intently to his thin, almost whispering voice, leading a shared meditation as we tried to understand his accented words, echoing the essential dharma of mindfulness, which he had read about in his books. The aura of his presence was awesome, but the important teachings of his life are much easier to gather from extensive reading of his lectures published over the past 60 years. As co-founder of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, Thich Nhat Hanh has had wide influence. But the essential teaching is in this short quote. When we die, we will lose all our possessions, all our power, all our family, all of everything. Our freedom, peace, and joy then, in the present moment, is the most important thing we can have. Without an awakened understanding of impermanence, it is not possible to be happy. We have to live with peace and joy right away, not waiting for a future moment. We have to be well right now, right here, peaceful and joyful in the present moment. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way we live each moment. Every minute of every day, we are all headed closer to the brink of everything in our own lives. Though most of us are too preoccupied at any given moment to focus very long on that reality. We can only be rudely awakened when a serious illness or accident interrupts the normal flow of our routines, or when someone close to us dies, or when we go to a class or family reunion after a long interval of time, And we wonder, who are all those old people? The aging process is often seen as an accumulation of lost capacities. But with that larger perspective, we can also notice there are benefits to aging. I know my thinking and memory processes are somewhat slower, but I like to believe that my judgment and experience allow for deeper and richer engagement. When I do focus and slow down enough, I particularly enjoy an awareness of the precious value of simpler things, like a beautiful sundown or a moonrise, a quiet evening reading with my beloved, or it turns out even a night with uninterrupted sleep. What a gift. And I am sometimes able to delude myself into believing that I actually have greater wisdom arising from my experience. Sometimes I can believe that. But in retirement, I have fewer personal anxieties, and that's a gift, although I still have concerns about how our grandchildren will overcome the burdens of our collective legacies of climate change, environmental damage, and the other problems which have come from our really enriched modern society, in this country at least. But as my remaining time in this life dwindles, I have an overriding feeling of gratitude for all the gifts of companionship with my beloved spouse, with family, with friends with whom we still have connections, and memories of the acquaintances I've encountered along the winding path of life. How we've interacted with those folks we've encountered. Parker Palmer's book poses the central question, does my life have meaning? The question of meaning is one of all of us must answer for ourselves, he tells us. He quotes in his book, sometimes I'm able to affirm that I've made meaningful contributions in at least parts of my private and public lives. But at other times, everything I've done seems as flimsy and flammable as straw. Countering his own argument, he quotes a poem by a Nobel Prize-winning poet, Czeslaw Milosz. The poem is entitled Love. Love means to learn to look at yourself the way one looks at distant things. For you are only one thing among many. And whoever sees that way heals his heart even without knowing it from various ills. A bird and a tree say to him, friend. Then he wants to use himself and things so that they stand in the glow of ripeness. It doesn't matter whether he knows what he serves. Who serves best doesn't always understand. Reflecting on that poet's words, Parker Palmer admits that no matter how clear our goals may be, the truth is that we often don't know whom or what purpose we will end up serving. And as Jimmy Stewart's character discovered in that great movie, It's a Wonderful Life, the measure of meaning in life is also what our living and being and doing brings to the lives of others. I want to close with a longer selection from Parker Palmer's writings. He says, the older I've gotten, the harder it becomes not to think about my personal mortality. When you're younger, before you admit you're middle-aged or becoming a senior citizen, it's a lot easier to pretend that you're going to be an exception, that you aren't going to die. Teenagers, we know, really think they're bulletproof. But until we begin to reflect back through the years we've lived, we are probably not living deeply, and we really don't understand the fullness of life. To counter this tendency, centuries ago, the monks of St. Benedict were told to daily keep your own death before your eyes. Those monks and all of us benefit from full awareness that no matter how rich or important and famous we may be, death is coming. But two things happen if we meditate in a healthy way on the nature of life and remember that our lives are finite. One, we become more appreciative of life and all its gifts. But secondly, we can prepare ourselves for what Parker Palmer calls the big death by embracing all the little deaths that come our way all the time. The death of a dream, the death of a relationship. Whenever we lose friends or family members who pass on before we do, or move out of our circle of kinship, for whatever reason. And instead of trying to avoid feeling or thinking about those things, we should let ourselves embrace the reality of each of those losses and how they affect us in the present moment. And if we can embrace all those little deaths with equanimity, our hearts can become less brittle, so that our hearts can be broken open rather than broken apart. And those little deaths can allow us to exercise our heart muscle, as it were, with empathy and compassion for those others as well as for ourselves. And that can build our resilience and allow us to approach the reality of our own mortality with less apprehension and less fear. And if at the end of our consciousness we can tell ourselves how we showed up for others with those open hearts, then maybe you and I can die with a sense of satisfaction because we have lived a life of meaning as the persons we were meant to be. So may it be in your life and in mine. Inshallah, Amen, Om Shanti.